And so I, I, I met with people and I kind of would take things head on. And I remember going to a conference with all of our consultants, which is or actually it was not all of them, but it was the good bulk of the consultants.
Yeah.
And for a consulting and training company, this was the key, group in the company that was delivering our content to clients all over the world. And I remember meeting with them, and I was going to take an hour and go over the strategy. But I remember getting up in front of the group and say, "Look, my assignment from the coordinating team that put together this conference, the day-long conference, is to focus on the strategy, and I'm happy to do that. But if you'd like, I'd rather talk about what you'd really probably like to talk about." And my guess is what's on your minds is all the merger issues that have cropped up. Who's making what decision? Whose compensation system are we going with? What is the structure going to look like? What are we going to do with these national office versus regional offices versus local offices? Who decides? What committee, what teams are involved with this? And can we trust any of them? Can we trust you, Stephen? I actually verbalized what I knew was on people's minds. How do we know we can trust you? Or do you just have the Covey interest in mind? Or you're really looking out for the whole Franklin Covey team? So I tried to, give air to what I knew was out there to make it safe for people to get real. Because if I was going to get real, I wanted everyone to get real. Because I thought if we could get real and be authentic and be transparent and open and really talk straight, that we could begin to develop trust. And so I tried to model it and I tried to make it safe. And I took on tough things, including, the kind of the undiscussable issue of, Stephen, are you competent to be in this job, or are you just your father's son?
Oh,
We're put in here.
you verbalized that out loud.
I verbalized it. And because I knew that was on people's minds, the people that didn't know me, didn't work with me, probably wondering that in this combined company where it was kind of a we they. I didn't worry about that with my own team because they'd seen my track record of results. They'd seen what we had done together. We'd built a great company, very profitable, but now the other half didn't know. So I kind of verbalized this, and I'll tell you what, everyone said, "Yeah, don't talk about strategy. Let's talk about this." We spent the entire day, we bagged the agenda, and we spent the entire day, taking questions, listening, and I just tried to listen and to capture and to understand, and then to talk openly and to give the give and take, the back and forth, the ideas that would come to mind, the balancing act we're trying to strike, what we're trying to do, how we're trying to involve people, how we're trying to make decisions, who we got involved. I also gave them my story, my experience, what I'd done, my background, not, in a defensive posture, but rather you have a right to know who your leader is. And so you can have confidence in me. I want you to choose it. So let me just tell you a little bit about my background, my experience, what I've done, what we're doing here. But more than anything, I just tried to model listening first, demonstrate respect for what I was hearing, talking straight, being transparent. And then we made a series of commitments. I made a series of commitments coming out of this, because some we could answer right there in the moment. Others we had to study and work on, take back to teams to consider. But we wrote down several commitments. It was over a dozen. I can't remember exactly how many, of things we're going to get back to them on and report. And then I'll never forget, a week later, I came back and answered as many as I could and said, we've answered this, this, and this. Here's what we're thinking. We've got these more still out there we're working on. But I remember getting on a plane, flying back after that meeting. And one of the consultants said to me, "Stephen, we built more trust in one day than we have in the prior last year today." But yet I knew it was still just more words. They had to see more in actions. They had to see me can follow through with this. But from that, we used that as a springboard to declare our intent that we wanted to build a high trust team, a high trust culture, to signal our behavior of what we're going to do, what I was going to do to try to earn and gain and grow the trust. And then what was most important, I now had to do what I say I was going to do. I had to behave my way into trust just like you can behave your way out of trust. And I had to exhibit that and do that. And I hope and I think that I did. And we went from low trust to high trust. And once we built that trust on the team, then we could do everything better and faster. And we're more creative, more innovative. And we began to really hum on,
Mm,
on 7 or 8 cylinders instead of on 1 or 2. And it changed everything. And but we had to kind of address it, confront it, and then we had to behave our way into it. And it was from that experience, Whitney, that I came out of that and I said, "Wow, trust matters." And there's a high cost to low trust, just like there's an extraordinary dividend or return to high trust. And trust is learnable, it is movable. And
mm,
you can go from low to medium to high. You can build trust on purpose. And we have just done it. And that is, those are two big ideas
mm.
that trust matters and you can learn it. And that's where the speed of trust was born from my own experience, from the crucible of that experience, which was so extraordinarily impactful on me and very vulnerable for me to have that kind of experience.
It sounds like it was one of the hardest experiences of your life to that point in time.
And I would say maybe still to this day.
Mm,
I still I've had many difficult experiences and challenges and failures,
mhm,
but that was so gut wrenching
mm,
because it was my idea, well, on the Covey side, along with someone on the Franklin side, to come together, to
yeah,
combine. And I thought this was a great idea. And now it looked like it wasn't working.
yeah,
And I felt a responsibility for it. And it was looking like a lot of arrows were pointed at me being part of the problem. And that was gut wrenching. It was very difficult. And it took me a while to really be able to see it
mm.
and then to own it and then to do
And
something about it. But I finally came to and I said, I've got to take this head on. And there's an expression: if you're going to bow, bow low. And I had to kind of really go low and say, I need to listen
yeah.
and I need to learn. And I needed to make sure people felt heard and understood.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting when I hear that is that, that out of that crucible, I mean, it really is your crucible experience because out of that has come in many respects your life's work.
I feel that. And I feel like I came out of that far more informed, far more clear, and far more inspired of what I wanted to focus on and why.
Mhm.
And what I felt was most of the stuff on trust out there is either too academic or too simplistic.
Mhm.
It's, too theoretical, not hard to apply, or just too simplistic. Just trust everyone. It's a better way to live. And not nuanced enough, and doesn't have enough real. Hasn't waded through the complexity to
Yeah.
emerge on the side of simplicity.
Right.
To use that expression, the simplicity and the far side of complexity. And yes, and so I came clear that trust is misunderstood and underestimated by a factor of 10 or maybe 100.
Mm.
And trust is learnable, as a skill, as a competency. It's not something that you either just have or you don't. That's your starting point. But you can build trust on purpose, and you can move the needle on this. You can get good at this as a leader. And that's where Speed of Trust was born, because because this was the single most impactful thing I did as a leader and we did as a company, was to build a high trust team and a culture. And the idea that that's learnable is a big idea that can be shared with others.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so my life's work did come from this, and I felt inspired about it. And I felt it was better because I'd also been on the failure path, at least initially. And it'd be one thing if I'd only experienced success in building high trust teams, but suddenly people didn't trust me, who I always thought was a high trust leader. And now I'm not trusted. And the learnings from that made me a better leader, and gave me far more greater and deeper insight into writing this book and building a practice on how to build
Mm.
high trust teams, high trust cultures, because I've been on both sides of the ledger.
Right. Okay, one more question on this, and then we'll move on. Do you remember how you came to this place of, "Okay, here's what I need to do." So, people don't trust you. You go into that meeting, you say, "Here's what we're gonna talk about today." Do you remember how you came to know what you needed to do?
I do. See, when I was flying to that meeting, I was taking a red eye. I mean, we are just working around the clock. I was taking a red eye, and so I just slept, a little bit on the plane. But I remember on the plane thinking, I was preparing my presentation on strategy, and I remember thinking, why am I going to talk about this? No one really cares. This is going to be pablum.
Mm,
This is not on people's minds. People want to talk about these merger issues, about how we're going to integrate these two businesses, how we're going to, which structure is going to win out, which compensation system is going to win out, which philosophy, which approach. There's so many of these issues. They don't. This strategy is just highfalutin. No one
right.
really cares right now. And I remember saying to myself, this is not going to go anywhere. I'll come out of this meeting and I'll be in no different place than before. Maybe someone has a little bit greater confidence that I am a good strategic thinker, but they're
Mm.
not even going to hear that right now. And I remember saying to myself, what do I have to lose by being just real, authentic, open, and
Mhm,
let them see into my world the same things I'm seeing? So they see I don't have a hidden agenda. Let them see it.
mhm.
Let them be open. Let them see what I'm seeing, so they can see the things I'm trying to balance. And and I made the point that the height of subjectivity is to think that you're objective. And I said, that's true. The height of objectivity is to know that you're subjective and to take steps to compensate for it. So I said, look, I know I'm subjective. I'm coming from the Covey Leadership Center. That's my bias. So I'm trying to take steps to compensate for that by making decisions, by involving players that come from a different perspective, a friendly perspective, and having the decision making process be a mutual and involvement process to compensate for my bias.
Mm,
And I shared things like that with them because I know I'm biased naturally because of my experience. But yes, it came to me on the plane. What do I have to lose? Because right now this is not working.
right.
And because we'd been at it a year.
Mm.
We've been at it a year. I forgot to add that detail. This,
Just a
and
year, long year.
we were not succeeding.
Yep, yep.
So
Mm,
how could this get worse?
right.
And maybe it could get a whole lot better
Yep,
by just involving people in the problem and then working on the solution together, by being vulnerable, by being transparent, by being real, by being authentic.
Okay, so in your book, you talk about 5 different types of trust. There's the self trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, market trust, and societal trust. And I'm sure you could say them really fast. We don't have time to go through all of them, but so what I'd like to do is focus on the self trust because our work is really focused on the individual and how do you drive organizational change through the individual. So, will you just talk to us briefly about the pillars of self trust?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'll say is the idea of those 5 waves of trust that you just mentioned, my main point is that high trust teams, high trust cultures are created from the inside out, meaning we look in the mirror, we start with ourselves. So self trust will always precede relationship trust, which precedes team and organizational trust, which precedes market and customer trust, which precedes societal trust. So it all starts with
Okay,
self
I'm
trust.
high-fiving you right now.
Absolutely.
Roll
I
the
am too,
sleeves.
because it's got
Hi,
to be
Jenny.
inside out.
Yep,
You know,
okay.
you diagnose outside in, but you develop, you change, you transform inside out. Trust, likewise,
Yep.
is an inside out process, starting with ourselves. So, self trust. Do I trust myself? And do I give to my team, to my partners, a leader, a partner, a teammate who they can trust? Is it smart to trust me? If you start with this, then your ability to build that trust at every other level or wave goes up dramatically. But if you don't have that self trust or it's diminished or diluted, then you'll have a hard time really building high trust teams, high trust cultures. It's got to be inside out. Even if you think it's other people that are the problem, still the best way is inside out. As my friend Doug Conant, the former CEO of Campbell Soup Company, likes to say, the only way out is in. You've got to
Mm,
go in, you've got to go deep, and self trust is where you begin. And so I talk about how self trust is all about credibility.
mm,
And I describe 4 cores of credibility. And before I go into 4 cores, there's kind of 2 key halves of it: character and
mm,
competence. Character and competence. You need both to sustain trust. And 2 of the cores of credibility come from character and 2 from competence. So I use the metaphor of a tree. We have the roots, the trunk, and the branches and the fruits of the tree. So the first core of credibility is the roots. That's integrity, honesty, truthfulness, being congruent, being authentic, doing the right thing. It takes humility and courage to have integrity because it's easy to do the right thing when there's no cost or consequence. The test of integrity is when there's a cost or consequence. That's the roots, integrity. The trunk of the tree is intent. That's the second core of credibility. That's your motive and your agenda. The motive that best builds credibility and trust is caring.
mm,
The agenda that best builds credibility and trust is seeking mutual benefit. That's win-win. Where versus being self-serving. So integrity and intent flow heavily out of your character. The
mm,
next 2 cores of credibility flow from your competence. So this is the upper half of the tree, the branches and the fruits. And the third core is capabilities. And that's your talents, your skills, your expertise, your knowledge. The key question here: are you relevant? Are we learning, growing, improving, getting better, staying relevant? This is a big part of your work, Whitney, with what you're doing with change, growth through disruption, all the work, disrupt yourself, all the things to stay relevant in a changing world. Those branches, those capabilities produce the fruits,
mm,
which is the fourth core. That's our results, our performance, our current performance, our past performance. Why does that matter? Because people project upon us future performance based upon what they've seen. When they see a track record of results, it gives them confidence or
mm,
trust. Without that, there'll be a gap in that confidence. So I call these the 4 cores of credibility, which is
mm,
really self trust,
got it.
integrity and intent flowing from your character, capabilities and results flowing from your competence. And if we really focus on increasing, improving each of these 4 cores of credibility, we'll increase in self trust. We'll become more credible. It'll be smart for others to trust us. And that will give us more permission, more clout, and more courage to lead in ways that inspire trust with others and to take on tough issues and to, as Brene Brown says, to dare greatly, to do all kinds of things that come about from having this foundation of self-trust. As Goethe, the German philosopher, says, if you learn to trust yourself, you will then know how to live. And I would
Mm,
add, and how to lead. And
Mm.
so it starts with this self-trust. And those four cores of credibility is just a useful construct, a framework, a language, and a process to kind of assess. Because it's one thing if there's maybe lower self-trust because there's a gap in integrity. But what if there's lower self-trust because there's a gap in capabilities?
Mm.
We're not current, we're not relevant. Or lower self-trust because we haven't really delivered or performed or come through. We don't have a track record of results. Or maybe our intent is too self-serving and
Mm.
not oriented around helping and serving and blessing other people's lives and win-win and that type of thing, mutual benefit. But this helps you diagnose where you're at so you can assess what to work on, and then most importantly know what to work on of how you can build trust better and faster with people by first building it with yourself, by becoming more credible, more trustworthy, if you will.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of something that I learned when I had a conversation with your co-author on your second book, Greg Link, about self-trust. And then I want to hear, I'm going to give you a chance to think for a second,
Okay.
is some suggestions you have for people in order to build their self-trust. Just simple, simple suggestions.
Yep.
So here's what happened for me. I remember thinking to myself, I'm a trustworthy person. This probably happens a lot, doesn't it? You're talking to
Mhm.
people, they're like, I'm trustworthy. And then you start going through this definitionally, and they're like, oh, maybe I'm not as trustworthy as I thought I was. So here's what happened to me. I realized, oh, you know what? I tell people I'm going to go to a meeting or I'm going to go have dinner or I'm going to have lunch. And then I cancel a lot at the last minute because I've got too much work to do. There's just too much going on. And I realized that when I was canceling, that meant that not only could people not trust me, I couldn't trust myself because I wasn't keeping my word.